This is a movie that gives new meaning to the word bored. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2025 slasher sequel, The Strangers, Chapter 2. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and recommendations. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and even some tailored film recommendations. So be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. The Strangers, Chapter 2, stars Madelaine Petsch, Brooke and Gabriel Basson, and was directed by Renny Harlin. Set immediately after the events of Chapter 1, it continues the story of a trio of masked strangers as they hunt down an unexpected survivor to finish what they started. There comes a point in time where, as film viewers, we have to ask ourselves, what are we even doing anymore? Sequels are made all the time, and bad movies get made all the time too, but this is an especially egregious case. There's really no reason for this film to exist, for this trilogy to exist. Nobody wanted it, few people expected to enjoy it, and yet some people still went to see it in a confusingly self-reinforcing state of disappointment. Completionists like us are why the rotten corpses of franchises like this get resurrected. Chapter 2 didn't have a particularly strong chance. The original Strangers movie isn't universally loved, but has maintained a decent fan base. Prey at Night is even less highly regarded, and then Chapter 1 is a widely panned rehash of the first movie. There once was a time where if the first film of a planned franchise didn't do well, the franchise was cancelled and left incomplete. If only that were still true now. Unfortunately, this trilogy travesty was filmed back to back to back, so it was unlikely to just be completely abandoned. It still could have been dumped on streaming, but no. The theatrical release plan was kept for some reason, drawing in the morbidly curious completionists and disappointing us as much as expected. I may not have expected anything from this movie, but I sure hoped for it at least. I know that some people enjoy hate-watching things and take pleasure in a movie failing, but that is not me. I love movies, and always go in wanting to like every movie I see. That obviously doesn't always happen, but it's my hope at least. Middle films of poorly planned slapdash trilogies rarely turn out well, but coming into Chapter 2, I thought there was potential for something. That the rehashed copy that was Chapter 1 would somehow make sense as a segue to something revelatory or interesting, a genuinely new chapter. But no. This is instead a waste of everyone's time, a stepping stone film that's unnecessary in every regard, adding nothing to the story or franchise. Chapter 2 is a film that cannot stand alone, picking up where the previous film left off and requiring that you first subject yourself to Chapter 1. There are a few location changes, a hospital, the woods, a house, but this movie largely boils down to being one highly repetitive chase. Maya encounters the strangers, runs, hides, dramatically covers her mouth while continuing to loudly breathe, is subsequently discovered, and then narrowly escapes, over and over again. Rinse and repeat. The character decisions are as dumb as you'd expect. There's some ridiculous and very random CGI. The amateurish editing feels befitting of a student film. There's a boatload of unconvincing acting. But perhaps worst of all, this is a Strangers film that is somehow without a single ounce of tension. You could argue that this movie tried to do something different. And I suppose, compared to just reshooting a previous film in the franchise beat for beat, it kinda does. There was some minuscule, barely perceptible potential here that drew us gullible, hopeful completionists in, but as with Chapter 1, this latest installment fails to understand what made the 2008 original work. The tension, the relatable this could happen to anyone feel, the fear of the unknown, fear of the strangers. None of that is here. In fact, this movie decides to step further away from that than ever before. In a baffling reshoots decision, Chapter 2 gives us a series of flashbacks, providing us with small hints of backstory for the masked killers. We even find out who Tamara is, and if she was ever actually home. That may all sound like information you'd want at this point, after 4 movies seemingly building up to the lore reveal. But trust me, you don't actually want any of this. It's so little information, but it's also so dumb. Whatever mystery was left to the strangers vanishes. Their fear-inducing power over us gone because they're no longer strangers. They're knowable characters with actual pasts and backstories. This movie features a mid-credit trailer for Chapter 3 to try to drum up excitement, but it's getting harder and harder to hold out hope for anything good to come from this trilogy. At this point, I can't see a scenario where the final movie is good enough to be able to recontextualize everything that came before to make any of it worthwhile. I hope they just release Chapter 3 straight to streaming as quickly as possible, to just get it over with. But unfortunately, I have a feeling we'll be right back here doing this again next year. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one, and really the only thing that could be construed as a pro, is that this movie isn't just a rehash of a previous film in the franchise. As with Chapter 1, I'm obviously really reaching here to scrounge up something positive to say about this movie. It's not an original film by any means, but I suppose it does sort of try to do something different for the franchise. It tries to expand on the story some and provide a continuation we had yet to see before, but unfortunately does so pretty poorly and misguidedly. On the prolific con side, the biggest issue is the script. It may not be a completely devoid of creativity rehash this time, but it's not a reasonable or good story either. This thing is a mess of random cobbled together ideas. There's less dialogue and no relationship drama this time, which could certainly be seen as an improvement, but the dialogue that does remain is still bad. The plot is incredibly repetitive, with our main character rinse and repeating the same run, hide, and escape plan for 90 minutes. Really, this is just pointless middle-of-a-trilogy thriller that only works to undermine itself by giving us flashback backstories for the strangers, who, by their very design, should remain an unknowable, lurking mystery. Con number two has gotta be the dumb character decisions. This issue is obviously not exclusive to this film, or even this franchise, but wow, is this just a series of frustrating moments. Maya somehow managed to make herself a final girl in the previous chapter, but she has absolutely no sense of self-preservation, repeatedly making the dumbest decisions possible in nearly every situation. She is the loudest, most inept hider I've seen in quite some time, constantly getting herself trapped in increasingly more absurd locations, and is just perpetually and unnecessarily putting herself in unsafe situations. The third con is the lack of tension. The Strangers is a franchise that relies upon, no, absolutely hinges on, tension. Without it, the premise just can't work. Chapter 1 failed in that regard, largely because it was a rehashed reboot of the original 2008 movie. Anybody familiar with that film already knew every plot beat, so there was no opportunity for suspense. But Chapter 2 was uncharted territory, and should have been surprising enough to generate tension. But no. It's plagued by poor editing and features a large number of awkwardly quiet scenes that desperately needed a score to do the heavy lifting. This movie is essentially one big chase scene, dotted with periodic games of hide and seek, and yet somehow there isn't an ounce of tension. Instead, the audience is left bored, not caring who makes it out of the film alive, and just wishing it would be over soon. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying The Strangers Chapter 2, or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies or anything else. I'm gonna give The Strangers Chapter 2 1.5 out of 5 paws, and that's being generous. It at least attempts to do something slightly different from the rest of the franchise by mixing up the settings and giving us some misguided backstory lore, but this revamped trilogy continues to be a failed experiment. With a repetitive, poorly written script, dumb characters portrayed with extremely stilted performances, amateurish editing, and not an ounce of tension, it's difficult to find much that could be construed as positive here. I would recommend The Strangers Chapter 2 to almost nobody. If you subscribe to this channel and watch my reviews, you know that I almost never say this, but there's very little that's worthwhile in this movie. I don't think genre fans are gonna have much fun with this one, even if you attempt to watch it in a so bad it's good context. Maybe the ridiculous boar scene on its own, but that's about it. Other than that, this is purely for masochistic franchise completionists like myself. If you liked The Strangers Chapter 2, I would recommend Halloween 2. This is another Part 2 horror sequel that immediately picks up where the previous movie left off. This movie follows Laurie Strode in the hospital following her babysitting ordeal as she continues to be stalked by Michael Myers and tries to survive the rest of the night he came home. If you want another slasher featuring a killer who thinks burlap sack masks are stylish, you might want to check out In a Violent Nature. This is another sluggish slasher featuring some unnecessary backstory for its masked killer. It's slow and repetitive, but adds in a killer's point of view gimmick and features a couple solid gnarly kills. And if you'd like to stick with the Strangers franchise, you should watch The Strangers Prey at Night. Chapter 1 might seem like the more obvious recommendation with its consistent lead and director, but Prey at Night is actually probably closer to this film with its attempt at doing something different and its comparative expansiveness, as the characters flee from the strangers throughout a trailer park rather than being confined to a single home. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen The Strangers Chapter 2? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite film franchise that was canceled before its completion? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insider information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe here at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.